Okay, today is April 6th. This is where we were when we left off before the March break, and welcome back. And this is the first time I've done this, so my apologies if it doesn't sound smooth. All right, so metabolism. We talked about catabolic, breaking down, burning, energy release processes, anabolic, which are the opposite, building larger molecules, and they need energy. These diagrams show catabolic and anabolic reactions. Catabolic reactions always have less energy in the products, so energy goes out. Anabolic reactions, energy comes in. In all cases, you have to get over the activation barrier unless you have an enzyme. So enzymes speed up reactions by lowering the barrier to the process. Here's a big picture of metabolism that we started with. 100% of the bioenergy comes from the sun. It's trapped by plants, autotrophs. They use photosynthesis to grow. Heterotrophs, like us, eat plants and burn the energy from the plants to help us go. There's only one, the most important equation in biology, as I said. Here is the photosynthesis equation. 6 CO2 gas, 6 H2O liquid. Light energy makes 1 glucose sugar and 6 oxygen. That's photosynthesis going from right to left. The exact reverse reaction, so photosynthesis left to right, reverse reaction is cellular respiration. Glucose plus 6 oxygen makes CO2, water, and energy. Super important concept is the oxidation reduction concept, which means electron transfer. We talked about this before we left. Reduction is whenever something gains electrons. Oxidation is when it loses electrons. In a simple way of looking at it, electrons on the left side, reduction, electrons on the right side, oxidation. Transfer of electrons is how energy moves through the biosphere. One of the most important energy electron carriers is called NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or NAD for short. NAD exists in two forms, NAD plus and NADH. NAD plus gathers 2 electrons to make NADH, and therefore that's a reduction. NADH can go back this way and release those 2 electrons, and those 2 electrons carry energy. So solar energy is stored in powerful electrons carried by these electron carriers. There are 2 important molecules in metabolism, and you don't need to know the structures, but just the general form of them. First is adenosine triphosphate, ATP. Adenosine, that structure, you should recognize this as a carbohydrate. That we haven't covered yet. 3 phosphates, so this is ATP. The bond between the second and third phosphate is a particularly high energy bond, so ATP is a cell battery. ATP breaks up to ADP in a phosphate and releases energy, but ADP in a phosphate plus energy can make ATP. So it charges up this way, energy comes in, makes ATP, and discharges like this, energy leaves. Think of ATP as a rechargeable battery for your cells. NAD, I just talked about before, is the electron carrier. I like to think of it as an electron dump truck. It's basically a molecule. It doesn't matter how complicated it is. It's just a molecule that carries hot electrons, energy-rich electrons. It picks them up at one place from your food, takes them to another place somewhere else to deliver the energy. Are similar processes. Starts with the glucose, a 6-carbon molecule. In both cases, the first steps are the same. 2 ATPs are used to phosphorylate, what it's called, phosphorylate the 6-carbon molecule. That gives it extra energy, because remember, ATP holds energy. It destabilizes this molecule, breaks it into 2 3-carbon units. Those 3 carbon units go through a series of steps, ending up at pyruvic acid. Each is a pyruvic acid. In those steps, 2 ATPs are produced for each of these molecules. This is a phosphoglyceraldehyde. 2 ATPs, but 2 are used, so there's an overall 2 ATPs produced in process. A very important thing is to make those 2 ATPs come out, you need to have a dump truck come in. Electron dump truck comes in and picks up those hot electrons. If this is glycolysis, those electrons are going off to the mitochondria to do work. In fermentation, this is where the fermentation step starts. It's necessary to dump those electrons back into pyruvic acid, changing it to a different molecule, often ethyl alcohol and CO2. And this is called the fermentation step. The only reason this happens is to free up the dump truck to come back and pick up electrons because it cannot produce the ATP otherwise. It is an energy wasteful process. This is only done if there's no mitochondria available. The backside of this diagram is just to show you the process in detail. It is not critically important that you know it, but it's just the steps that go along to make pyruvic acid. Again, reviewing on from your notes that we had before we left, this is the whole process shown in one page for aerobic respiration. Aerobic means oxygen is needed. First, a glucose is broken into 2 pyruvic acids. There is an energy equivalent you should know about here. 1 NADH is equivalent to 3 ATPs. 1 FADH2, another kind of dump truck, is equivalent to 2 ATPs of energy. We'll get to this later. Pyruvic acid enters the mitochondrion. Here, it's converted to acetyl-CoA and a CO2 is lost. This is called pyruvate oxidation. Pyruvate and pyruvic acid are exactly the same. It's just a different way of saying the same thing. This is a 2-carbon molecule because 1 carbon was left as CO2. Every time a CO2 leaves, an NADH is produced 100% of the time. This 2-carbon molecule combines with a 4-carbon molecule called oxaloacetic acid to make citric acid. Citric acid is converted to isocitric acid. No energy changes. Isocitric acid becomes alpha-ketoglutaric acid, and that's a 6-carbon to 5-carbon, so CO2 is released. Again, whenever CO2 is released, an NADH is made. Alpha-ketoglutaric acid goes to succinic acid, another CO2 is produced, and another NAD. Succinic acid is a 4-carbon molecule, and it's converted to fumaric acid, and an FAD picks up some hot electrons there. Fumaric makes malic, malic makes oxaloacetic acid, and here's the one point where NADH is made, but no CO2 comes out. Then we're done the cycle, and now you're ready to go back in. Oxaloacetic acid, 4 carbons, plus 2 makes 6 carbons. This is called the Krebs cycle. And it is, in my opinion, the metabolic hub of the cell. This reaction takes place in the heart of every mitochondria in a place called the matrix. Here's the mitochondria. Mitochondria is, remember, a subcellular organelle. It's a double layer organelle. It has many features which makes it one of the most intriguing organisms or organelles known in nature. Make sure you do the online video lesson on endosymbiosis and find out the secret of the mitochondria. Terminology here. This is the mitochondria. I'm using my sketch down here to show you how it works. Outer membrane, inner membrane, intermembrane space between the two. Matrix is anything in the center. Krebs cycle happens in the matrix. Ins and outs of the mitochondria. Pyruvic acid is an input. Pyruvic acid, remember, has 3 carbons. Every pyruvic acid that comes in, 3 CO2s are released as an output. They come off the Krebs cycle. Excuse me. ADP, the low energy form, plus phosphates come in, and out comes ATP. And oxygen's required, and that's part of this process here. When oxygen is used up, waste H2O comes out. This is the big picture. This is the whole thing. The next video is going to go into the details of how this system produces ATP. Okay, that's all for the review.